Hello again, Chris Lee and Chase Robinson of Southeastern 16. We're going to talk some Arkansas today. We'll start it with football, end it with some hoops talk. When we do that, our guy, Andrew Hutchinson of bestofarkansassports.com, joins us. Hutch, thanks for joining us. You're always busy, and you always make time for us, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. It's good to be talking some Arkansas sports. I've been dealing with a little bit of sickness the last couple of days,
Oh,
but officially off the injury report today.
well, feels like optimism in Fayetteville is higher than it's been in a while. A lot of optimism around the basketball team, but a lot of renewed optimism around the football team after I think a win over Tennessee that most people didn't expect. How did that change the mood and the narrative around the program?
Oh, I mean, it completely shifted the narrative. Beating the number 4 team in the country. Granted they don't look like the number 4 team in the country right now, but beating the number 4 team in the country, having a big win like that'll do wonders for you. And the conversation has shifted from can they find 6 wins and get to bowl eligibility to what kind of level of
Yeah.
bowl could they get to? How many wins could they get? It seems like 6 wins is the floor at this point. With Mississippi State and Louisiana Tech still on the schedule, but now it's like, okay, well, surely we can beat LSU. Surely we can beat Ole Miss. Texas coming to town. Hey, we don't care. Like, this is a team we could beat. It's a rivalry game. Now, I'm personally not that confident, but I do think this is a team that could easily win 7 games at this point, which, I mean, let's be honest, that should get Sam Pittman in the conversation for SEC Coach of the Year, because no one saw that coming unless you totally were wearing your rose-colored glasses coming into the season. So if they get to 8 or 9 wins, which, again, isn't totally outside the realm of possibility, not likely possibly, but if they do, then you seriously got to consider Sam Pittman for that award, because what he's done this year has been nothing short of remarkable after going 4-8 last year.
Yeah, and Andrew, you cover this team. You watch this team closely. What is it about this team? I mean that and they had close losses early in the season, Oklahoma State, and then they lost to A&M, and then they turned around and beat Tennessee. What is it about this team that made that possible to slow down Tennessee's rushing attack and to virtually score more points and win that game?
I really think that you got to give a lot of credit to the coordinators. I mean, I think Sam Pittman deserves a lot of the credit, but the coordinators that he has, specifically Travis Williams on the defensive side.
Yeah.
All this talk all offseason was about Bobby Petrino, what he would do with the offense, and he's been good. Don't get me wrong, but what Travis Williams has done as the defensive coordinator has earned him a lot of money, to say the least. And I know Arkansas fans are hoping that it's Arkansas giving him that extra money and not some other school that comes in and swoops and gets them. But the game plan he dialed up against Tennessee was phenomenal. They had not really used any dime looks this year with 6 defensive backs, but that's what they opened up with, and they played a majority of the game in that look, and it was something they literally put in that week. Travis Williams, I guess, came to Sam Pittman on Sunday of that week and said, "Hey, I've got an idea." They implemented it, and they executed it flawlessly. I think the defensive line, being as effective as they were against Tennessee's rushing attack, despite having 3 down linemen, was great. Eric Gregory, a super senior, been around forever. He played probably one of his best games of his career. Landon Jackson has just gotten better and better as the season's gone on, and is looking like the All-SEC kind of player he was projected to be. So I really got to give a lot of credit to the coordinators, specifically what Travis Williams dialed up on that last game. He was a brilliant plan, and the team executed it flawlessly pretty much.
Yeah, here are the stats for Arkansas's defense. Yards per play allowed this year in each game. Pine Bluff, 2.8. Oklahoma State, 5.2. UAB, 5.3. Auburn, 7.1. A&M, 5.0. Tennessee, 5.2. That is remarkable consistency. And the Auburn game looks like the outlier. And in that one, I think they had 5 turnovers. So even where the yards per play didn't work out, you'll more than take it given that. But what do you think you can take from what they did in adjustments and apply going forward?
It's going to be interesting. I'm curious to see what they implement from that game plan against maybe a more pass happy attack like what LSU has. Can it be effective against quarterbacks like a Garrett Nussmeier, who is an older, more veteran guy? Because think about it, the guys they've faced so far have all been redshirt freshmen, depending on different varying levels of talent. But Nico shutting him down like they did. Will it be effective against an older, quarterback like Nussmeier? I'm curious to see kind of what they implement. But as long as the defensive line plays the way they do, I think that gives them, the flexibility to do that. They've been really, really stout against the run. They haven't necessarily, gotten after the quarterback as much as maybe, fans or even the staff would like. But they've just been so dominant against the run that it's really helped them do those other things, be creative with the back end like they did using 6 defensive backs against Tennessee. So I'm curious to see kind of how much of that is something they can continue moving forward, because it works so great against Tennessee. We'll see if it's as effective, moving forward as it was in that game.
Offensively for Arkansas, I mean, we know how good the ground game has been thus far. What do you like about this offense, and what are they seeking to do to kind of build on kind of the basics that we've seen from Arkansas so far?
Well, I think the number one thing they've got to figure out is how to not shoot themselves in the foot, how to not turn the ball over, because that's been the biggest mistake and been one of Sam Pittman's biggest talking points. I mean, that's the first thing he said after the Tennessee game was, if we turn the ball over the same amount of times as the other team, then we have a chance to beat anybody. And that includes top 5 teams. So if they just avoid doing that, then, they beat Oklahoma State. If they don't turn the ball over,
yes,
you could argue that they beat Texas A&M as well. They could very well be undefeated at this point, which is wild to think about. So I think that's probably the biggest issue. I would say maybe protecting Taylen Green has also been a focal point. They did a lot better job of that against Tennessee. It's a major reason that they were able to win that game. Taylen Green is dealing with an injury right now. It sounds like they're confident that he'll be back for LSU. I'm not ready to write it up as 100% right now. But if you keep him clean, then that helps things as well. So that's probably the 2 biggest things they got to shore up over the last half of the season and to be effective as an offense.
BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for everything sports betting, every stat, matchup, breakdown, even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL, NBA, to political props. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to the website today, get in on all the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Hutch, you got to Taylen Green. I was going to ask you, how much of the performance inconsistency was due to injury? How much will the injury linger? I mean, do we have any idea what the season looks like ahead for him in terms of how good he can be?
Well, if you saw the injury happening against Tennessee, it did not look good. And, the immediate reaction is like, oh, God, I hope he didn't tear his ACL or something like that. We found out pretty quickly it wasn't ACL. They initially thought it was an MCL injury. Then come to find out a few days later that it's a bone bruise. That can linger. You worry about that for a guy like Taylen, who's does so much with his legs. That's a big part of his game. But it sounds like they're optimistic that he's going to be ready to go. Considering when the injury happened, I don't think that you can't really blame any of his inconsistencies on the injury. That's just kind of how he's been. But I will say that Tennessee game was one of his better games since probably the very beginning, since that Oklahoma State game probably. And so if you can get him, assuming the injury doesn't bother him or linger mentally or anything like that, and if he can play like he did against Tennessee, then I think that bodes well for this offense. But I still think it's going to be up and down. I think he's going to have some really good games like that. He's also going to have some games where the inconsistencies still show through. So as long as he's healthy, I still like him as Arkansas's quarterback. Malachi Singleton is the backup, a redshirt freshman, really talented guy. has mostly struggled, but did lead the game-winning drive to beat the number 4 team in the country. So I think that could give him some confidence moving forward. But I think Arkansas wants and needs Taylen Green to be as good as they could potentially be this year. So I think he has the potential. You know, he's shown flashes. It's just going to boil down to that consistency factor.
Yeah, that's really good. Looking at this matchup with LSU, I mean, we've seen Arkansas get a big win at home a couple of weeks ago. LSU's playing good football right now. What, in your mind, are a couple of things that you say, hey, Arkansas has got to do this if they want to walk away with another win on their home field Saturday night?
Sam Pittman said something on Monday that sounds a little weird when you think about it, but I kind of agree with him in that you got to shut down LSU's run game. You can't let them be two-dimensional. They don't have a particularly scary rushing attack. You know, they're definitely a team you got to worry about through the air. But if you're letting them get both, if you're letting them run the ball effectively and then also do what they do through the air, then that's not a good recipe for success. So I think they've got to continue being stout against the run. You know, I said it earlier, I'm anxious to see what they dial up defensively. Do they stick with the dime look where, you know, the 3-man front, play a lot more zone coverage? I'm very curious to see what that looks like. But I think it all boils down to how effective the defensive line, the front 5, front 6, however many they put in the box, how well they can shut down the run game. So I think that's a key. And then I would say, you know, on the other side of the ball, whoever the quarterback is, I think it's going to be Taylen Green, but whoever the quarterback is, can you give them time and can you run the ball? I think that's they like to run the ball. If they're effective on the ground, Jaquin Jackson has been very good when he's on the field. Braylon Russell is a freshman that's kind of emerging. That's a name for people to keep an eye on. He had his best game against Tennessee and was critical on that game-winning drive. Those are two big backs. I mean, Braylon Russell's a 253-pounder. Jaquin Jackson's a big physical guy as well. If you've got those guys running at you and you can lean on them, then, you know, control the clock. You know, that would be vintage Sam Pittman play. You don't think of Bobby Petrino as doing that, but I think he likes to lean on the run game as well. So I think that's probably the key is the run game on both sides of the ball, shutting down LSU's run game and then establishing the ground game yourself offensively.
Arkansas has, I think, one of the most underrated guys in this league. And to prove my point, we've not even mentioned him yet. Andrew Armstrong. How good's he been? What's he mean to their season going forward?
I think he's made himself into an NFL prospect. He was very good last year. I thought he was one of the more underrated receivers in the SEC last year. He had over 700 receiving yards, caught a ton of passes, just very, very consistent. That's the biggest thing about him. When we talk about Taylen Green inconsistency, well, Andrew Armstrong is just Mr. Consistent. And I think he's taken his game to another level this year. He's really good with the ball in his hands after the catch. He maybe doesn't have the breakaway speed that would, you know, make him like a first round prospect. But I just think he's just such a heck of a good receiver, great hands, gets open, catches everything that's around him. So I think he's been phenomenal. And honestly, I kind of hope that they figure out another guy to throw it to, because it's almost like Taylen Green's always looking for Andrew Armstrong, even whenever other guys are open. There was the play against Tennessee where Isaac Teslaw, another really good, guy in terms of dependable hands, he was wide open for a would-be touchdown, but he locked in on Andrew Armstrong on a third down play, incomplete pass. They had to settle for a field goal, which they missed. Looked like a costly play. They ended up winning the game, but it was an example of, sometimes they rely too much on Andrew Armstrong, and it's easy to fall into that because he is so good and so dependable. But they maybe need to mix it up, spread the ball around to some other guys, maybe get some tight ends involved and stuff. So, but Andrew Armstrong has been phenomenal, and he's going to be a guy that hears his name called during the NFL draft next April.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about tight ends, and one specifically, Luke Haas, who I thought would have one of the bigger seasons of tight ends in this league. And I think he had a big opener, if I remember, and has done almost nothing since. I think he's been a little banged up. Correct me if I'm wrong, but where does it go with him, and what's been the thing holding him back? Because I would have bet the farm he had more than 8 catches right now.
Yeah, he hurt his back in that week 2 game against Oklahoma State, and I think it's lingered. He's played through it, and he's still been effective as like a run blocker, And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, because that was an area of focus for him this year, was improving as a blocker at the tight end position. But yeah, definitely surprising that he hasn't been more productive in the passing game. And I think he's a guy that it sounds like this bye week last week was really good for him, because honestly, the whole tight end group is banged up right now. I mean, Ty Washington was very limited in practice leading up to the Tennessee game. Andreas Posca, another guy that they have as more of a blocking tight end, has missed, I think, the last 3 or 4 games with a concussion. Sounds like he's back. So the tight end group as a whole has been beat up, but sounds like they've gotten healthy. Luke Has is a huge part of that. I'm still waiting for that Luke Has breakout game. We saw it last year against LSU. Maybe it's this
Before he got
week.
hurt, he was great. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see if he's able to have that breakout performance. But I think a main contributor to his lack of production has been his health. That back injury has kind of lingered, but it sounds encouraging based on what Sam Pittman has said the last couple times we've talked to him.
All right, I was at Media Day in Mountain Brook yesterday for basketball. So I got to ask you a couple of basketball questions with that on the brain. Feels like excitement around this program is pretty high heading into this year. Yeah,
you go out and hire a guy like John Calipari, a Hall of Fame coach. I think that will do the trick. You've got a program that's been kind of revitalized under Eric Musselman. Enjoyed a lot of success. You have a couple of Elite Eights, a Sweet 16. Fell back down to earth last year with a bad season, but you bring in Coach Cal, and I think people are fired up. He's got an incredibly talented team. Not very deep. He made some headlines this year with bringing in only basically 9 rotation guys that he's going to lean on, using his remaining spots on basically walk-on type players. That are going to help them in practice and potentially develop into something, but the bulk of the minutes are going to go to those 9 guys, and it's a good little mix. I mean, you got 3 heralded freshmen, you got a few big time transfers that came from other programs, then you got some transfers that came from Kentucky to follow Coach Cal. So a good little mix of players, and so I think that there's a ton of potential. The key is they all got to stay healthy. And right now they were healthy. They did a little tip-off tour event over this past weekend while the football team was off. They went down to Hot Springs and Pine Bluff, and they were going to play like kind of a red-white type scrimmage thing, but they didn't have enough players. They ended up basically holding an open practice. But there were still people that showed up and were fired up and excited to meet the team and get autographs and all that kind of stuff. So the excitement's still at an all-time high, but you got to get healthy, and you got to get healthy quick, because Kansas, number 1 Kansas, is coming to town for an exhibition game here in, I guess, a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that'll be fun. But tell me, we know, like, if you're a college basketball fan, they're upperclassmen and what they can do. But Boogie, Fland, Karter, Knox, Billy Richmond III, where do those guys fit in? Those are the 3 heralded freshmen, obviously, that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I think that Boogie and Karter are probably the 2 that people are maybe expecting the most out of. I don't think you should write off Billy Richmond, especially with the 9-man rotation. He's going to get plenty of opportunities. But I think what Boogie and Karter bring to the table is what's going to excite fans. I mean, Karter is an elite level scorer. He's the younger brother of Kevin Knox, top 10 pick that played for Coach Cal at Kentucky. A guy that can score at all 3 levels. Boogie, a true point guard type. He's going to play a lot. I don't know if he's necessarily going to start. You do have DJ Wagner. You do have John L. Davis, guys that are going to handle the ball a lot. But Boogie's going to play a lot and going to have the ball in his hands to make plays a lot. So a really good passer, can score. So I'm very anxious to see kind of what those guys look like in live action, because I haven't had a chance to see it yet. I wasn't able to go down to any of the open practice portions or anything like that. So they're going to be big time guys on this team and play a big role on whether or not they're as successful as people think they could be.
Hutch, thanks for joining us today. Tell folks what you've got coming up at bestofarkansassports.com.
Yeah, so we're still cranking out coverage of the upcoming game against LSU, and We're mixing in some baseball coverage. The baseball team, we didn't talk about it today, but the baseball team did scrimmage Oklahoma State this past weekend to cap fall ball. So we're all over that. And then, of course, we are doing some basketball coverage as we get closer to the season getting going. So got all that, cover all three main sports, and we'll do that. The best thing about our site, as I like to tell people, is there's no paywall. You can check it all out for free. If you're a fan of another team, just want to kind of get a look at what Arkansas's got going on, don't want to pay anything, come check us out at bestofarkansassports.com, and we'll get you covered.
Yeah, it's an unwritten rule when you join us that we're going to at least mention baseball at some point, but we promised each other we wouldn't talk about it today since we have so much going on. But I know you and I will, because SEC baseball is a real passion of both of ours. But Hutch, thanks for joining us. Wish you the best. And hey, can't wait to see Arkansas LSU this weekend.
I'm looking forward to it, guys. Anytime.
Thanks. All right. We are Southeastern 16, where we cover SEC baseball, basketball, football year round. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps our analytics, and enable your notifications so you know when we come out with content, which we do many times a day. Advertising inquiries, go to caroline.smith@southeastern14.com. For Chase Robinson, I'm Chris Lee. You've been watching Southeastern 16, presented by BetOnline.